Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 103 of College Football Throwdown, our first episode of 2021. I'm your host, Alex Schmitz, and today I am joined by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans. It's good to be back and doing a podcast.
That's right. You might be able to hear that we're doing this in person. We're actually in Traverse City, Michigan right now, visiting my folks for the past week, and we just got back from our own little beer tour, going to a couple different bars that we wanted to see out of town. So no beverage for the podcast tonight, but we're still in good spirits.
That's right.
That's right.
We did some pregame.
That's right, to make sure that we're ready. And for those of you who may be listening to College Football Throwdown for the first time, we are a college football podcast done by the father-son duo by college football fans for college football fans. And we haven't done one in a while, so we'll be talking briefly about the national championship game, which we previewed on our previous podcast, as well as some of the developments that have happened in Nebraska football in terms of the spring game and recruiting updates, and looking a little bit ahead into this upcoming 2021 season. So to start things out, we are going to go with that national championship game, as I mentioned. On the previous episode, we actually also did that in person back at the campsite you guys were staying at in Arizona. And we were joined by your brother AJ for that one. And so we all gave our traditional predictions for that national championship game. I predicted that Alabama would win 38-31 over Ohio State. You predicted 38-24, and AJ predicted 42-34. So I thought it'd be the closest, and I guess that means I lost. Because the final score ended up being Alabama 52 and OSU 24. So a little more lopsided than any of us were thinking. You said you got
24 right.
You got 24
got
right from
State's.
OSU. Just needed a couple extra touchdowns for Alabama. And that was a weird game, as you recall, because their star running back, Trey Sermon, literally ran the first play of the game. They got the ball, got hurt immediately, was out, and it was already like, oh shoot, like they need every weapon they can get.
Right,
and they just lost one of their best players.
There were just a few things that happened there in the first 5 minutes of that game that just spelled doom for Ohio State's real opportunity, and they never were able to get back up off the mat. I mean, they got knocked down by those unexpected events, and then boom, it was just steamroll after that. It really never seemed like it was in doubt. So
yeah. Well, it was. So that's right. The first quarter, it was tied up 7-7.
True.
But wasn't there some sort of thing that you had mentioned at the time? I remember somebody had said like, "Oh, it might be 7-7, but like we figured them out, boys. Things are going to be fine."
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And from there in the second quarter, they went into halftime up 35-17, and they just kind of controlled the whole second half.
Right.
OSU really couldn't get anything going.
They really couldn't, and Alabama was just doing their thing, and probably could have named the score a little bit. You know what I mean? Like if they had really wanted to push some things offensively, they probably could have put some more yards on them, more points on them, but they didn't need to. And that's typical Nick Saban style. That once he is confident he's insecure of the game, then he basically shifts it down a gear and just tries to grind the clock and finish the thing off and just be done with it.
Well, an interesting note I'm reminded looking back at this, Alabama was actually the only team with a turnover. They had one fumble.
Right.
Ohio State had no turnovers. And their rushing yards were equivalent, 147 to 157.
Right.
But passing is where Alabama was just killing them. It was 464 versus 194.
Right.
Which added up to 621 total yards of offense for Alabama and 33 first downs. So, Yep.
It was control of the football game for sure.
Yep.
And even though, like you say, I mean, they didn't have to run it so much because they were passing it with such effectiveness, and that's what they did.
Yep. Yeah, and I guess they probably went to the rushing later on just to wind down the game because
Right.
it was over at that point.
Right.
So yeah, disappointing from a spectator perspective, and of course, all of us predicted that Alabama would win. It was obvious that they were the more talented team, but Ohio State had surprised everybody with their not just upsetting Clemson but blowing Clemson out.
Right.
So that I think kind of gave people some hope, like, whoa, well, maybe they really can do this. But like I said, losing Trey Sermon right away, and they had other injuries. Their quarterback was not 100%.
Well, and they had some offensive and defensive linemen who were out because of COVID, if I remember correctly. There was like
true.
8 or 10 players that were unavailable for the game. Not all of them starters, but certainly a lot of contributors. So that had a huge impact even before the game was started.
Yeah. So Nick
weird-
Saban wins another one.
Well, and a weird year, right? Just
Well,
a weird
yeah.
year overall. So I'm not. This is one of those things where the national championship. Yeah, I'm sure because it's Alabama. It's going to count no matter what. But it's one of those years where you just kind of check it off and move on. And I'd like to think that also applies to Nebraska.
Let's hope so. Speaking of the Big Red, we had our spring game. When was it now?
May 1st, I think it was.
That's correct, May 1st. So about a month and a half ago now. And the score for that game ended up being White winning 21-20. The White team kind of
scored on the last play of the game. In fact, it was
right.
an extra play. Scott allowed them. The clock had expired in the official game, right? But because they had this marching down the field opportunity, Scott made the decision to go ahead and let them play one more snap. And they scored a touchdown.
Yeah. So from that perspective, it was exciting. It was
Yes.
fun for the fans, for sure.
Yeah.
And this spring game had some kind of unique rules in that it was fully touch only, no tackling for the first half of the
right.
game, primarily because we had a recent kind of spat of injuries from some important players. So
Right.
they're being a little more cautious.
Right. They the way they describe it is that their spring practice had been very physical. They had accomplished and seen a lot of what they needed to see. They wanted to be able to show off for the fans a little bit, but they were also super focused on protecting their starting 44. So that early first half effort was to get as many of the top 44 or 50 players through the first half without any substantial injuries, and then the second half was spent mostly among lower unit players being able to battle it out and really show themselves for not only the coaching staff but maybe for future coaching staffs as they consider their futures, which we'll get into a little bit with transfers and the like going forward.
Yeah. And obviously we could go over like the stats for the game, but those don't really seem too important because it's all our same team. So I'd rather kind of focus on the players that stood out to us from
Right.
the game.
Right.
One that definitely stood out to me was Yance, who had 9 rushes for 63 yards.
Yep.
And the thing I don't think those numbers reflect is that some of those were good runs, like where he
was earning the yards.
yeah, he was earning the yards, and maybe if he had been able to break one more tackle, he would have been off the races, kind of thing.
Right. And he got a lot of buzz, so that's not a name that won't be unfamiliar to Husker fans who might be listening to our podcast for sure. But he's a guy that we kind of got, because of some relationships that some of our coaches had with some schools down in Florida. He comes to us as a walk-on, but he has the potential to be a scholarship level type talent, and so we are really lucky, blessed to have someone like that. But he showed that he needs some work. He's going to have to prove that he can block in all those passing situations that occur in Scott Frost's offense, and he also needs to develop more stamina. Because even in the spring game, with the fairly limited number of carries he had in that, there were times when he needed to either take himself out of off the field or just did not perform as well when he had to do things in back-to-back plays, that sort of stuff. So he's got some workout endurance issues that he needs to work through before he's going to be the kind of player that we would want to be a guy that our coaching staff would have confidence in that could be a every down kind of player. But I would agree with you that the running backs in general, I think we saw flashes from a number of guys that are potentially capable of being very good, solid running backs. Did anybody just absolutely splash and be like Mo Washington was a few years ago, where it was so obvious the talent that he had? No, I don't think we have anybody like that. But I think we have a stable of running backs that are pretty solid and salty, and are maybe better physically ready to do the rigors of the Big Ten.
Yeah, and the other kind of leading rusher on the other side of the team, on the red team, was Marvin Scott, who had 11 rushes for 75 yards. So yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that was the general theme I saw from the game, was that there weren't a ton of like major superstar standouts or anything like that, but there were promising signs in a lot of places.
Right, I would agree. I think that this is a team roster right now that is composed of players that can help us win a lot of Big Ten games. And I think it's been a deficiency of Scott's roster in the years prior that he had some talent, but he did not have a roster with enough players that were Big Ten ready. And that's the key for this season, I believe, is how many of those guys that appear to have gotten themselves in a position by both their maturity, their physical, stature, and recruiting and such, that we now have a team that looks and feels and appears to be an a Big Ten caliber football team. I think there's still some gaping holes that we have that we still don't have for the team that will keep us from being a real championship contender. But I think that's a team that will allow us to be competitive in almost all of our games.
Mm-hmm. Then switching to the quarterback play, of course, everyone's eyes were on Adrian, coming out again in his senior year now. And he only played in that first half, which was touch only, like we mentioned. And he ended up throwing it 12 times out of 20 attempts for 127 yards with one interception. And that one interception was an ugly one.
Yes.
My opinion of Adrian's performance was basically about average, in that he had some nice throws. He also tucked it and ran it, for some first downs and some good situations. But then he also had the occasional pass that just totally missed, or where he threw it into bad coverage, like in the case of that interception.
Right. I would agree with you that Adrian did not splash in some huge positive way, although I think he did on his running skills, which leads me to the conclusion that he was quite banged up at the end of last season, and it seems that he has leaned himself out a little bit. He's a little lighter than he appeared the previous season. So I think I liked what I saw with regard to his running skills. I felt like, for the most part, his decision-making was okay, but he still showed, particularly in the case of that interception that he threw, just a poor combination of decision and physical delivery was a problem. So, is he good? Yeah, I think he's capable of being a very good quarterback for us. But I still am concerned about, ultimately, is he going to continue to be that bad decision maker who basically is good for 2 to 3 turnovers every game? And if he is, then he's going to lead us to some victories, and he's going to lead us to some defeats because of his own individual decision making.
Yep. And I have it here. He ran it 9 times for 49 yards, so for a half of play, that's pretty good, I'd say.
Yes.
And then also, then to replace him in the second half, Logan Smothers was in a lot. And he threw it 8 times out of 13, no interceptions for 76 yards.
Right.
And of the other quarterbacks that played, I was definitely most impressed by him, beyond Adrian. He showed some competence, but also some of those jitters that you'd expect from a young player like that. Mm-hmm. But I think that he showed potential in his throwing arm, that as he practices more, he could be a solid backup.
Yes, and it's interesting because he represents the type of quarterback that Scott was initially recruiting to Nebraska, and now I think they're kind of changing their direction on that. And the young freshman who had come in early, Harburg, I'm messing his name up, but he's the young fella that's from the state of Nebraska, but has a heck of an arm, and he showed some great arm strength in his performance during the spring game. But he's not the running athlete that Smothers is, or Adrian was, or Luke McCaffrey was. So I mean, it's a kind of a contrast in styles that we're seeing transition. I think it's Scott recognizing that he needs to get some quarterbacks in his stable of options that are really good throwers, that have the accuracy to deliver all the passes that they need to do in that offense.
Yeah. Harburg, he completed 9 passes out of 23 with 1 interception, so not a great completion rate, but he got 120 yards on those 9 passes. So like you say, prove that he's got some strength.
He does
on that arm.
Yes, he does. And he's, again, that's a guy who is supposed to be going to prom this spring, so I mean, he's a young young fella that's going to just keep getting better.
Mm-hmm. We didn't get to see him much in the game in terms of switching to receivers right now. What were your thoughts on what we saw of Omar Manning? Because I know he's gotten a lot of talk in the build-up.
Right. I thought Omar played well at times. He did drop one ball that during the game that really was very, very catchable and would have certainly excited the crowd had he been able to finish that play. So I think he's a guy that has amazing physical skills, but I think he's still very much a work in progress in terms of having the mental toughness and stability to be a consistent performer, especially in crunch situations. You know, until I begin to see him make great catches in critical situations. It's one thing to make that spectacular catch against a lesser team in garbage time or in a game where you're pretty comfortably the superior team. It'll be another thing when he's playing against an Oklahoma or a Michigan or, heck, any of the Big Ten teams really. And it's a critical third down. We need the first down. Is he the guy that can catch that ball? And if he's doing that, then I'm going to be very excited about, where he can lead because his physical skills are off the charts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and switching to the defensive side of the ball, obviously the game was back at the beginning of May, so I will admit some of the details are fuzzy, but I remember there being some, like knockdowns of passes, and, the defense seemed like they were, getting excited when somebody on the team made a good play and things like that. So, because there was quite a few times where, like the red team would get a drive going and then kind of get stopped and then either punt it or they brought out the field goal kicking team.
Right.
So what were your takeaways on the defensive side of the ball?
I would say that the takeaway I have on the defensive side is that we demonstrated in that spring game that we have more depth than we've had in a long time. We have some tremendous size and depth along our defensive line. I think we have still some major issues with pass rushing, both out of the outside linebacker and the defensive end position. I think we have some good, solid players at those spots, but we have no difference makers. We don't have a guy that's going to be remarkable in terms of pass rushing and that sort of stuff. I mean, there are a few guys that flash a little bit that way, but again, until we start seeing it in consistent fashion this fall, I would say that what I am confident is that our defense will be solid against almost everyone we play. But we need some guys to rise to that next level over these. This is going to be a great period of development for them because of when spring practice ended and then all the way until the first game. They've got a lot of time to, continue to work on their skills, work on their strength and their conditioning and their quickness. And we need them to emerge in the fall ready to be difference makers.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree with that. You might have noticed, and to the Nebraska fans out there, this will probably be old news to many of you, but we didn't mention certain names like Luke McCaffrey or Wan'Dale Robinson in this spring game breakdown, and that's because both of those players, along with a few others, have transferred out of the program. McCaffrey we kind of knew that was coming because he is dead set on being a quarterback. And we
speculated about it, but then all the indications were, that it looked like maybe he had decided to go ahead and stick it out, and I get the impression he left that indication with the coaches, because I think although they knew the circumstance and understood that there was certainly a possibility that Luke would leave, I think they felt confident based on the conversations that they had been having with him that he was going to stick around. But then it didn't happen.
Right. Which is obviously a bummer because clearly Luke's a great athlete, very fast, and we were able to get some good use out of him in the Wildcat formation and things like that. But when Adrian was hurt and we had to bring Luke in as our main guy, he proved that while he's got great legs, his throwing just isn't at the level we need for Big Ten, prime time football. But the bigger shock to me was Robinson, for sure. Because, although obviously it's frustrating that he's played well and gotten these good stats here, and yet, he has all these losing records to look at. I can understand his frustration there, but I know part of it was also personal in that he wanted to be closer to his mom, who's going through some sicknesses and things like that. So what was your read on the Robinson situation when that first was announced?
Yeah, now see, that wasn't as much of a surprise to me because there was a lot of what do I say, rumblings going on for a long time. So it was pretty clear that he was frustrated with the offense and how he was being utilized a little bit. I think he probably felt like he was being used at running back too much and being asked to basically be the guy that made plays in between the tackles in situations where I don't think he would have liked to have done that or didn't like doing it, and it was causing him to get beat up. So I think he had hoped and had visualized that the offense that Scott ran, out of that duck R position, that he was going to be finding himself, one-on-one in open space and being able to make guys miss, and instead we often were relegated to bringing him in and using him as a running back from the backfield. And that was probably not his preference. And so after the season was over, he did an assessment in his own personal situation. And yes, the family element was certainly a part of it, but I think a greater part of it was his desire to really get himself in a different situation offensively. Ironically, I think we now have the wide receiver room with the selection of large, tall, big wide receivers, talented wide receivers that we have, young but and inexperienced, but certainly talented, that he would not have been having to carry the burden that he did before. Running back room also, I think we have more depth and a little bit more maturity there. Some guys who were true freshmen last year that are now redshirt freshmen, have been with the team for a little longer. So Wan'Dale, if he had had the patience to stick around, I think there would have been a payoff for him in the more traditional duck R role, but he didn't choose to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is definitely a bummer because he, has been such a difference maker in the years that he's been here.
Well, he's going to be a talent wherever he is, and he's landed in Kentucky, his home state, and so we'll get to see how he does. Although, ironically, I think their offense was worse than ours. So I'm not sure. It depends on what all transpires with them. I think they have a new coordinator and some other new pieces too that might dramatically change the look of their team. And of course, we still have the same quarterback. We're still going to be going with Adrian. So maybe that was part of it too, as he knew that if he had stayed at Nebraska, he was going to be basically limited by Adrian's ability or inability to get him the ball for at least another year.
Right. Yeah, that makes some sense. So what is kind of your impressions, because I know there have been some other transfers of players of a smaller scale than the two we just mentioned, but there have been others. But then at the same time, Scott's been recruiting, and we've gotten some, more highlight recruits here recently for the upcoming class. So what's your kind of feeling on who we've lost versus who we've gained here in these first 6 months of 2021?
Right. Well, I would say that, our 2021 class was a pretty solid class. Okay. We met a lot of our needs except for that, difference maker, defensive end, rush, outside linebacker type of player. And so that's the area that continues to be the one we miss on. But I would say that overall, I think we continued to stock the shelves, so to speak, with guys that are capable physically of being the kind of players we need them to be competitive in the Big Ten. I look at this as a mountain we're climbing, and you got to kind of take the lower paths of the mountain before you can get to the higher end, and we're in that process right now. And I'm okay with where we are because, getting frustrated that we can't get better talent when we know it's there. We know there's more talent out there, but we're not getting the interest from them, and rightfully so based on our recent experience, our recent performance. So I would say that Wandell is an absolute loss. There's no doubt about it, and it's going to hurt that we don't have him. So the question is, who else? Luke, he is a tremendous athlete that would have been a great asset for us, especially if he had been willing to maybe consider doing something other than quarterback, or at least been willing to do quarterback and something else, working both angles. He seemed, committed to staying at the quarterback position, which was something that he probably wasn't going to have a great deal of success with at Nebraska, so he moved on. We'll miss him, but I think we got other young quarterbacks that will step up. Wandell will be missed. All the other guys, we've lost a couple of running backs and some other positions, and yes, I would have loved to have seen them evolve and develop, but you know what? I think we're going to be fine in all those spots. Wandell's the guy I'm going to miss.
Yeah, and me too.
The team's going to miss.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, because I know we got a 5-star transfer from one of the bigger schools
from Ohio State recently. Yeah, now and then. So the 2021 class, to kind of summarize very briefly on that, most people going back to December knew most of our class. We only had one addition in that second signing day in early February, and that was the good linebacker from Hawaii, and I'm going to butcher his name here. Wyndon Hahuli, and he was a great player. I had a phenomenal film, so I think he's a guy that will help us a great deal in the linebacker room. But that's probably still a year or two away, right? So now we're looking at this class. This class is going to be unique in that because the senior class last year was so small, we really right now are looking at a scholarship class of maybe 14 players. Now, as more players likely leave the program between now and the beginning of fall camp, we probably will see that number go up. The good news about this class is we just recently, in the last few weeks, picked up our quarterback recruit, and typically Scott has only recruited one scholarship quarterback per season, and it's always nice to get that guy in the fold so he can peer recruit other players. We've picked up a couple of nice, good-sized wide receivers, but this is a class with only 14 in size. You're not going to see 5 offensive linemen and 4 defensive backs and all that sort of stuff. You're going to have to kind of pick a little more selectively, right? So that's what they're doing right now. They're going though with guys that are maybe lesser in perception, right? They're more 3-star type of players rather than the 4-star players that we were going after before, and I think that's a reflection of the poor performance on our field. You're just not going to continue to get, rivals 250 type athletes to express great interest in you when you continue to lose football games. And so this year becomes super critical for what happens in the remaining years, the next few years. But I think we have the talent already pooled from Scott's previous years to have a pretty salty team this year. Our bigger challenge then is the schedule we are faced with.
Very true, very true. We've talked in the past about how this is going to be a very important year for Scott just in general, because now we've had 3 years of disappointing losing seasons. And so, now we have Adrian as a senior quarterback, all that sort of stuff. So this is really the time for the team to come together, and Scott to show that like his system can work in the Big Ten, or else there might be trouble and we might be getting a new coach. So we'll see. But to your point, it is going to be a tricky schedule this year, and I believe we've also said in the past where we might very well have a better team this year, but still have a similar record just because our schedule is so tough, because one of our non-conference teams is Oklahoma, and we're playing at Oklahoma, which obviously, as a Nebraska fan, is very exciting just to have that rivalry back, from the good old Big 12 days and the Big 8 before that and all that good stuff. But from a scheduling and win-loss record point of view, it's rough because we're almost certainly going to lose that game. And so that's another loss on our record. Obviously not in conference, but still might hurt our perceptions. And then we're also playing at Michigan State, at Minnesota, at Wisconsin, and playing home with Ohio State, Michigan, and Northwestern.
Right. And so we do have a challenging schedule just in terms of the the East Division trade-off that we have this year. Includes Michigan State, Ohio State, and Michigan. I mean, that's a maybe one of the tougher draws that you could get. Although Michigan State's down and rebuilding a little bit right now too, so hopefully we'll have a shot at that game early this season. But that's a coach there that beat Scott Frost twice when he was head coach of Colorado, and so I think this guy feels pretty comfortable about his ability to prepare a team for Scott Frost's offense. That won't come as any big shock to him. But that's going to become a critical game. I think the bottom line is we need to eke out a 6-6 season. If Scott can do that, I think he can begin to build momentum, especially if we get a 6-6 season that then is capped with a victory in a minor bowl game, right? And then we can kind of try to build off of that towards, leveraging the improved culture and the improved knowledge and expertise, especially on the offensive side of the football, to do the right thing. But this is a peak year for our defense because we've got so many, of the super seniors, as they're called now, the guys coming back
right.
who get the extra year because of the NCAA rule for COVID. We're going to have probably 4 of these super seniors coming back who are starters. So instead of having 6 starters, not 6. Instead of having 5 returning starters, we're going to have about 8 or 9. So our defense, at least front line, will be guys with lots of experience, and you hope that translates to higher performance.
Yeah, well, and frankly, as we discussed last year, although there are certain difficulties we've had with the defense and with the overall coaching of them and the playmaking decisions and things like that, frankly, they kept us in a lot of games, and it was the offense's inability to capitalize on those opportunities that really lost us games. So that's the area where I am looking to see the most improvement, personally, is on the offensive side of the ball. One interesting thing looking at our schedule here is, if I'm not mistaken, we play 8 games in a row before we get our bye week between Minnesota and Purdue. Then we get another bye week before we play Wisconsin, which will be nice, which is at Wisconsin.
Right.
But 8 games in a row with no bye will be a rough stretch, because that also involves...
But we did that to ourselves.
Oklahoma and Michigan State and Michigan.
We did that to ourselves in part because another change that occurred this season. We remember we were scheduled to play Illinois in Ireland in week 0, right? Yes. And then we were going to take a week off to help provide some time for the return trip, not have too much jet lag after that. And so then week 1 we weren't going to play anybody. So we had a basically a week 1, week 2 bye, which made sense when you were traveling over to Ireland. But now that you're not, you didn't want that. So then we rearranged the schedule a little bit, and we put in a game in that early season time frame. We still have the Illinois game, first game of the year. So we're going to play a Big Ten Conference game, first game.
At Illinois.
then the next game is Fordham, and Fordham was the add-on, right? So we added them in so that we could then have a later season bye week, and it turns out we're going to get 2 then in that latter part of the season, which kind of makes more sense. The only concern would be if we end up getting really banged up during preseason practice, and you wished you had a early season game to rest everyone, or a week to give everybody a little break and kind of re-get their legs. But hopefully that won't be the case this year, that we won't have that situation, and our guys will be there, and hopefully, frankly, a game like Fordham, that needs to be a victory. That needs to be not just a victory, but a pretty easy victory, right? One where we play a lot of time, put a lot of time to our second and third teamers.
Right. And I mean, frankly, that Fordham game is the only one on the schedule that really is like we should win this comfortably. Because like you say, at Illinois is going to be, a
They
test.
beat us last year.
Yep. And then Buffalo is a very talented team.
Yep.
Obviously, Oklahoma's very good. And that
Buffalo's a team that was extremely talented last year, but has lost their head coach and lost quite a number of players, who graduated and moved on. So they're a team that we should beat, especially now that they have a new coaching staff and everything. That all happened kind of late because that coach at Buffalo was hired at Kansas.
Okay,
it was
that's
a late.
right.
It was a late hire process. So as a result, I would like to think that was a game we could win. But that new coach at Buffalo is a guy from Michigan staff, so he's going to be familiar with Nebraska, and again, no surprise there. So he could take the talent that's been recruited at Buffalo and still make things interesting if we're not ready to play.
Yep. So, yeah, and like you say, kicking things off at Illinois against a team that beat us last year, which is a Big Ten game,
And they, more than anyone, they have a new coach also. They fired their coach, hired a new coach, but a ton of their seniors came back. So they have like 20 out of 22 returning starters. I mean, their entire team is back. And so they are going to be a very difficult team to defend. And we don't really know what they're going to do, right? We kind of do because we know the leniency or the inclination of the new coach, right? Because he's a guy that coached at Wisconsin, coached at Arkansas. He's got a lot of history, right? But he's now hired a whole new staff, and the tweaks that they might be making to their overall offensive philosophy, we're not going to know that until it unfolds in front of us in game one. So we damn well better be ready and well-versed defensively because we don't know what's going to be coming at us.
Right. Yep. So that's the thing. Like you say, a 6-6 schedule is, something to kind of aim for.
Ideally, as you look at this schedule, you've got Illinois, Fordham, Buffalo, and then Oklahoma, and then the Big Ten really kicks off with the Michigan State game. Well, after that Oklahoma game, you'd like to be 3-1. Right? You'd really like to have found a way to beat Illinois, a team that we, frankly, have better talent than.
Right.
And then you got Fordham and Buffalo, both teams that are inferior to you in terms of your roster. So as long as you don't shoot yourself in the foot like you've been doing for all 3 years under Scott Frost, and you find a way to play reasonably clean football, you win those games. Now you go down to Oklahoma, all bets are off, right? You want to compete, you want to measure yourself and say, okay, how far have we come? Right, at 3-0, there can maybe be a little excitement about that game, but then you have to bounce right back, go to that Michigan State game, and get back on the horse and get it back on the winning track. And if we can do that, then all of a sudden the Northwestern game becomes huge for Nebraska's season. So very early in the season, because the latter end of the season, it gets brutal. I mean, it gets brutal. You look at the back end of that schedule, and you've got Northwestern, Michigan, at Minnesota, Ohio State, at Wisconsin, and Iowa. I mean, are 6 of your last 7 games. So that's going to be a brutal schedule to get even 2 or 3 wins out of.
Right.
I mean, if we're 2-4 out of those games I just described, that would be a pretty darn good measure.
To your point, though, both of our bye weeks are in that latter half of the season, so that will hopefully help us out.
Right, and maybe we go 3-3 in that stretch.
But I see your point in that Northwestern game, which is the 6th game, right there in the middle. Yep. That's going to be a key game.
It is, and if we can win that, and we might find ourselves at 5-1 at that point, right?
Right.
Then we have a decent chance of getting to 6 victories and maybe even 7. If we don't, if we're not fighting for our 5th win there, then a 6-6 season is going to be really tough to achieve.
Right.
So.
Yep. And it is a home game, so that part helps us out.
Yes.
With that Northwestern game. All right. Very good. Well, is there anything else you want to preview about the upcoming season before we wrap this up here?
Well, I was just going to say I have an opinion that I want to encourage to our listeners and to you especially as well, is that I've decided that I would rather be optimistic than pessimistic. And so I am going to say that this is the year where some of the efforts that Scott has been toiling in, but has not yet produced the desired result, starts to come to pass. That the inconsistency of Adrian Martinez will be diminished somewhat. It's not going to go away, but it's going to be diminished. And if we get more consistent play out of our quarterback, if we get reasonable play out of our special teams, we win 2-3 games that we have historically been losing the last 3 years, and really the last 5 years. You go back to the last couple of years of the Riley era,
yeah.
and then the first 3 years of Scott Frost. He's lost so many games where frankly our team lost the game, the other team didn't beat us.
Right.
And so if we can just clean those things up, and I think we have the chance to be salty defensively where we're solid pretty much everywhere, and we have some depth so that one injury won't kill us in terms of our performance on the field. So my feeling is, gosh, are we going to be 9-10 wins and win the division? No, I'm not there at all. But what I am saying is we have the basis, the core of something to build on, and I think that there is reasonable thought to be optimistic that we can get to that 6 or 7 win total this year, and then win a bowl game and maybe be at 8 wins. I mean, imagine being 7-5. You lost to most of the big names that are on your schedule. You're good, but you're not great, right? You didn't win the conference division or any of that.
But from where we've been the past 3 years, that would be huge. A big improvement.
Absolutely. Then you go to a bowl game, you play some middle of the road bowl game, and you win that game, and all of a sudden you're 8-5, and you got optimism.
Those who have listened to us for a while, though, will know that that's essentially the diagnosis we've given pretty much every season under Frost, and it doesn't materialize. We lose those games where it's by less than 7 points,
right? But
we find a way to lose them,
right?
And that doesn't reflect how close they were. Doesn't matter.
That's true.
In just looking at the record.
And I'm choosing to do that because the alternative is we need to burn the house down again and start over, and I don't want to even contemplate that. At least not now. I want to give Scott all the support and his staff that I can, in the hopes that they can begin to show signs of where this thing could truly head.
Mm-hmm. That's what I want to see too. So we'll see how it's going. We're planning on doing a podcast this upcoming month in July to go over some more national topics that we have time to cover today. For example, the rumblings about a possible 12-team playoff and the effects that might have on the upcoming seasons and players not wanting to go to bowl games, opting out, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots going on in the world of college football. But if you want to listen to those, you can go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. You can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com if you want to let us know what you think of the podcast. Give us a question that we can read out on the air. We always love hearing from the fans. Or you can leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and let us know how you think we're doing. So thank you for joining me, Dad. It's been fun to do this in person again.
It has been, yes.
Yep, it's been too long. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.